We truly are living in the strangest of times. The truth is considered hateful, payment processors are okay with literal pornography but will ban people who speak wrongthink, diversity is oddly considered a strength, and outright censorship is rife, for our own good of course. Facebook even declared the word honk a violation of their terms of service. There is only one appropriate response to this: honk honk. It would be understandable if people simply checked out and moved to a remote island somewhere in the middle of the Pacific to escape it all. The rest of us will have to pray for a time when sanity once again returns to the world, but who knows when that might be. Unfortunately, those who still hold the biggest and loudest megaphones are hell-bent on silencing all dissent in any way they can. They defame those they disagree with, lobby to get them removed from social media, then have the nerve to complain when those people move to new platforms. When the biggest pushers of fake news are the ones most loudly complaining about it, you know the world has gone insane. Yet, when these lying peddlers of fake news and censorship in turn become the targets of the beast they created, suddenly their story changes. Suddenly, democracy is under threat. Suddenly, we need to discuss freedom of speech. There's an old saying, if the left didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. And the issue under the spotlight today proves that clearly. How's it going, everyone? Thank you so much for joining me today. The video will continue shortly. I just wanted to ask a very small favour, and that is, if you do end up enjoying it, please share it around. Please spread the message because YouTube won't share it for me due to algorithm changes and censorship. Also, make sure you are following me on Gab, Minds and BitChute. The links are in the description. That way you can remain notified of all my work. Plus, I post new content there all the time. Thank you very much again for watching, and we'll get back to the content right now. On June 5th, 2019, the Australian Federal Police raided the office of far-left taxpayer-funded propaganda centre, their ABC, as a matter of national security. From the Sydney Morning Herald, and I quote, "The raids are in connection with a 2017 report called the Afghan Files, based on leaked defence documents. The police warrant names ABC reporters Dan Oakes and Sam Clark and news director Gavin Morris. The sensitive documents were marked as Osteo, Australian eyes only. The raid comes the day after Australian Federal Police raided the home of News Corp journalist Annika Smethurst in connection with a 2018 story she authored concerning top secret plans to expand surveillance of Australian citizens. Smethurst has not been charged with any offence. It also comes a day after a former Australian military lawyer charged over the leak of documents to the ABC was committed to stand trial in the ACT Supreme Court." End quote. On the one hand, this is indeed a threat to our liberty and to the freedom of the press. These journalists didn't steal the documents, they simply published them. It indicates the growing authoritarianism of the state, and it should concern absolutely everyone. That said, the media have done more to create this situation than any other group in society. They cheered on the silencing and censorship of anyone they disagree with. This is little more than them getting a taste of their own medicine. After all, this is what mainstream media so-called journalist Peter Grest had to say about the matter of Julian Assange, who also published sensitive documents handed to him, and I quote, "To be clear, Julian Assange is not a journalist, and WikiLeaks is not a news organisation. There is an argument to be had about the libertarian ideal of radical transparency that underpins its ethos, but that is a separate issue altogether from press freedom. Journalism demands more than simply acquiring confidential information and releasing it unfiltered onto the internet for punters to sort through. It comes with responsibility." End quote. In the full article, Grest argues that Assange is bad because he released information about Afghans helping the USA. He attempts to garner sympathy and thus to credit the act of releasing the information. He ignores the fact that these people are also actors in a field of war. They made their decision to enter it. Rather than shoot the messenger, it's usually best to hear the message and discuss the information released. That said, other parts of the left-wing fake news media were a little more reasonable. The far-left Guardian argued Britain should send him to Sweden and had this to say about the possibility of US extradition, quote, "The Guardian disapproved of the mass publication of unredacted documents at the time and broke with Mr. Assange over the issue, but whether or not the documents should have been published, their publication should not be punished by the American justice system, which could impose a cumulative sentence of 180 years on the latest charges. Mr. Assange is an unattractive character who has quarrelled with almost all his former supporters. Few will be enthusiastic about defending him. Yet he must be defended against this extradition request because the indictments against him threaten to damage freedom and democracy in both Britain and the US." End quote. The ABC's Media Watch presented all the sides, then had this to say.
Criminalising those who publish classified information, as well as those who leak it, threatens the very foundations of a free press, and indeed, a free society.
Extradition to Sweden for dropped charges aside, this is indeed the moral position to take. Julian Assange did nothing wrong in publishing documents handed to him. In fact, he did a great service. After all, he helped save us from a Hillary Clinton presidency that likely would have resulted in World War III. We got stuck with an unknowing puppet who doesn't understand that the real threat to the USA is demographic pressures through all immigration, not just illegal, and also tech censorship, but this is hardly Assange's fault. Overall, despite one or two editorials, the reaction from the mainstream media was one of essentially disinterest. There was debate and claims it hurt democracy as mentioned, but mostly they didn't seem to care much at all. At least not compared to the reaction we saw when the AFP rated them over doing the exact same thing that Assange did. The ABC quickly published an article decrying this blatant attack on democracy, stating, quote, "Journalists are in a precarious position, particularly journalists engaged in public interest journalism. This journalism is vital to government accountability and a vibrant democracy, but has a tense relationship with Australia's national interests as conceived by government. National security law has severely undercut source confidentiality by increasing and easing data surveillance. National security laws have also criminalised a wide array of conduct related to the handling of sensitive government information, both by government officers and the general public." End quote. The Sydney Morning Herald, who were ambivalent to Assange, published an article slamming press freedom in Australia. They said, and I quote, "Australia's defamation laws make it difficult to defend even truthful journalism in a courtroom. Our freedom of information laws are weak by world standards. The national security agencies are entirely exempt, and other bureaucrats just thumb their noses at them. And suppression orders mean dozens of journalists, including me, are currently being threatened with jail in Victoria over stories we wrote about the George Pell trial." Investigative journalists today often navigate a legal obstacle course just to get their stories published, and it's only getting worse. Australia dropped 2 places in global ranking for press freedom this year, and after the ABC and News Corp raids, you would expect next year that we'd slip even further. End quote. The horror of it all. Won't someone think of the children? Isn't it ironic that they complain about defamation laws? They don't seem to worry about these when they defame and slander patriots. They already get away with repeatedly telling flat-out lies. They could hardly ask for more freedom to debase the conversation than that. The Guardian came out and strongly condemned the raids, saying, quote, "The AFP media raids aim to suppress the truth. Without it, we head into the darkness of oppression." End quote. Funny how the truth suddenly matters to The Guardian. The ultra-extreme mega far-left Green Left Weekly said the raids were a quote-unquote grave threat to freedom. The Age said it was a wake-up call for journalists who left Assange swinging. The news even reached the British Isle as valiant protectors of the LGBTP community, the BBC, said, quote, Australia ABC raids expose lack of whistleblower protection, end quote. It is truly telling the level of fear and anxiety that goes through these mainstream media parasites when it's them who are the target. Unfortunately for them, it's hard to have any sympathy at all given their silence on and often outright hostility to online free speech and online freedom of the press. When Facebook said they were going to ban ethnic in-group preference for only those of European descent, these hypocrites cheered. Facebook took a dump on freedom of the press, and rather than bemoan censorship, the fake news media moaned that people had access to free speech social networks like Gab. Then, when Facebook extended the ban to simply milquetoast conservatives, the mainstream media remained silent. But wait, it gets worse. The Australian government literally cancelled the visa of David Icke and Milo Yiannopoulos for daring to say things the establishment parasites don't like. Where were the so-called Fourth Estate then? Why were they not demanding the government respect free speech and freedom of the press when the government censored those they disagree with? On this, the media's silence was deafening. Where were the fake news media when the government charged patriot Blair Cottrell for the grievous crime of offending the perpetually offended? Oh, that's right, they gleefully cheered on. Because you don't need integrity when you have a dishonest, far-left, anti-liberty agenda to push. These hypocrites haven't said a word about the fraud, tortious interference and suppression of dissent by Silicon Valley tech giants. Nor have they spoken out against slanderous labelling and creepy stalking by the same tech oligarchs. These mainstream media hacks are more than happy to campaign against free speech and freedom of the press online when it helps their agenda. When it suits them, they will even use literal ISIS supporters to shut down our free speech and slander half the population. The idea that these honking clown world journalists care even slightly about freedom of the press is as ridiculous as claiming Charles Ponzi was an honest businessman. If you believe their cries now, there is a bridge in the Simpson Desert for sale. Please feel free to email over your highest bid. The truth is, the mainstream media do not care about freedom of speech or freedom of the press one bit. Their bleats about AFP raids are not them valiantly standing up for liberty. It's them cynically protecting their own interests. They are dishonest propagandists posing as journalists. They care about money and pushing a globy, homey political agenda. The only reason they are whining so loudly now is because their push for a politically correct totalitarian state came back to bite them on the bum. If they truly valued freedom of speech and freedom of the press, they'd stop lying about patriots and they'd stand against Silicon Valley censorship. They'd stand up when others were being censored, not just themselves. They wouldn't hide the truth from the people in order to push an agenda either. They wouldn't marginalise voices simply because they disagree with them. That's not how a free society works. The media deserve neither sympathy nor liberty to push their dishonest anti-truth agenda. That said, it is worrying that the AFP are raiding the media, even if they are slimy watermelons. We need freedom of the press and freedom of expression so long as it's truthful. Maybe the mainstream media will learn, or maybe they won't. But if they don't, it will be only further proof that they are not concerned about the liberty of Australians or spreading the truth. We will know that they are only concerned about pushing their own agenda and silencing everyone else. I hope you enjoyed the video. Share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.